basic switch configuration, right? As we have seen already, the configuration of the Cisco devices, like what are the modes, right? What are the modes, and how do we basically configure an IP address, and how do we configure these passwords? How do we secure our devices? All this we have seen. So now let's see how do we configure a switch, right? So the initial task: perform initial configuration on switch, hostname, and enable password, console password, banner. Okay. Then we'll have convenience commands. Those are no IP domain lookup and login synchronous. We have already seen this, right? No IP domain lookup in order to avoid the device from generating DNS request. If we are giving something XYZ which is not in the list of this command list devices, oh, just you take last week's video and once revise it. Okay. Yeah. What actually happens is no IP domain lookup. By default, this is we have IP domain lookup enabled, right? Okay. So what happens is when you give a command, it will check in its command list whether it has it in that command or not. And if you don't have it, then what it immediately will generate a DNS request. Yes, that is the thing. In order to avoid that, we'll be stuck there for 15 to 30 seconds. In order to avoid this inconvenience, we'll use no IP domain lookup and login synchronous also, right? That is yeah, that's the thing. And verifying naming convention of the ports on your switch. Show IP interface brief. If show IP interface brief tells you actually what are all the interfaces connected to your device. Okay, see you might be connecting some Ethernet ports, Ethernet interfaces, or else fast Ethernet, right? Or else serial ports, right? Without going it to physically and checking it physically. Instead, you can just take the console or you can take the access of the device and just type this command: show IP interface brief. It's enough. It will show what are all the interfaces connected to your device. This we know. We will do it again. This lab will do it. Let's finish this. Okay. So basic switch configuration. If you are considering a switch, right? Actually, you will be having layer 2 switch and multi-layer switch, or else layer 3 switch. Layer 3 switch. Okay. Whether it is a layer 2 or layer 3, whatever it may be, the ports connected to that device, whatever they might be, the fast Ethernet or Ethernet or Ethernet or fast Ethernet or gigabit Ethernet, whatever the ports may be. By default, on a switch, those ports work as layer 2 ports. What do you mean by layer 2 ports? Layer 2 ports means that whenever a frame hits on the interface, they will only check the MAC address. That's it. Okay. We have seen Ethernet frame header, right? Yeah. You have seen Ethernet frame header. That is, you'll be having source MAC address, destination MAC address, type field, data, and FCS, right? Out of these, if an interface of a switch is a layer 2 interface, it has the capability to only check the MAC address. That's it. It will not check for the IP address, and it will not go to upper layer verification. It will only verify till the MAC address. That's it. That is why we call it as layer 2 port. Okay. But on the switch ports primarily used for switching layer 2 Ethernet frames, and the ports are always act as layer 2 ports by default, right? On a multi-layer switch, for suppose, think this is my multi-layer switch, right? I have four ports. By default, they are layer 2 ports. Yeah. But if I want to make them layer 3 ports, we have one command. And if we give that command, then the ports become layer 3 ports. Until and unless they won't be acting as layer 3 ports, they'll be acting as layer 2 ports. Okay. So switch ports primarily used for switching layer 2 Ethernet frames. Okay, don't natively support IP addressing. Okay, if you try to give an IP address on the switch interface, it will not accept. By default, it will not accept. You should make it layer 3 interface, then only it will accept the IP address. Then it becomes a layer 3 port. Okay. Right? What's the Which command? Which command? Which command? It's a simple command. No switch port. Go to that interface, whatever the interface you want to make it layer 3 interface. Just go to that interface and give no switch port. That's it. It will become the layer 3. Then you can give the IP address and whatever. It will then start inspecting the layer 3 header also. So this is about the physical ports, right? But if we want to, this is my switch, I need to take access of this remote access for suppose telnet or SSH. If I want to do telnet or if I want to take the access through telnet or SSH, ultimately the device must have an IP address, right? It must have an IP address. Then only the data is sent and it can be able to access the device. Okay, but here all the interfaces are layer 2 interfaces. I cannot give the IP address. Then how should I give the IP address to these? How do we do it? That can be done by creating an SVI, switched virtual interface. It is like a logical interface you are creating on the switch. It's not physically present, but logically you are creating it. Okay. So switch management IP address configured on a logical interface. It is a logical interface. When whatever the see what is management IP is very simple. If an admin want to take the access of the device, right? If an admin want to take the access of the device for management purpose, he must take the access through by an IP, right? If the device has an IP, then only it will give the access by through telnet or SSH. Okay, the IP on which you are taking the access is called management IP. That's it, right? So usually we configure management IP address on the switch on a logical interface. That interface is switch virtual interface. That is SVI. We call it as SVI. You getting it? Yeah. So initially it is initially in same broadcast domain as all physical ports. When you initially create it, it will be in the same broadcast domain, right? It will be in the same broadcast domain initially. It will be in the same broadcast domain as various other physical ports are, right? But native we can disable it but we can disable it. So configuring management address, in order to, if you first I told you that you have to create a logical interface on the switch, then you have to give the IP address. This is the command interface VLAN 1, right? Interface VLAN 1. Where are you giving this command? You are giving in the configuration mode of switch. Okay, always remember whatever the commands I am showing you, right? The important thing of these commands is in which mode are you giving those commands is important. Okay, somehow you will be getting what the command to be given somewhere else. You will know if you Google it, you will immediately know what the command to be given. But the thing you need to remember is where should I give that command? In which mode can I give that command is important. Okay. So interface VLAN 1, in which mode am I giving it in the configuration? As immediately I am giving the, so if you want to give an access, if you want to give an IP on a switch, ultimately you have to create and manage logical interface, and the command to create this logical interface is interface VLAN 1, and you are giving it on the in the configuration mode, right? As soon as you give this command, you will be going for the interface configuration mode. You can see here this if, it says that you are in the interface configuration mode, and as usually you can give this IP address and whatever address you want to give, and whatever the subnet mask you want to give, you can give it. And no shutdown, I told you already, by default whatever the Cisco device may be, the ports are in shut mode. That is very simple, they are taking rest, they are in sleeping mode, right? Once you give the IP address, okay, once you give the IP address, you need to wake them. Get up, now it's time for you to walk out. This is the command to tell that. Once you give this command, they become active and they start working. Okay, you gave this command that IP address, you give subnet mask, you give address and the subnet mask, but you didn't give this no shutdown command. The interface will be in the down state and you cannot use that interface. In order to make it up, ultimately you have to give this command, right? Yes. It's very simple. Like, you have one pet, you have one pet. Which pet do you like? Cat, dog, pet animal. Cat. Cat. Okay, you got a cat, right? You gave what does it eat? Cat. What does it eat? Eat. Meat. Meat. You gave it meat in a plate. You okay? You kept meat in a plate near to it, and you went. Will it eat? No, you need to wake it. Yeah. Arey beta, get up. You need to wake it. Yeah. You need to wake it. Then only it will come. Then only it will come to know that I have some meat and I should eat. That is the same thing happens. It's like, it doesn't mean that giving an IP address it does work. No, you need to wake it up. That is, give the command no shutdown. Then only it starts working. Okay, and exit. You'll be coming back and see IP default gateway. See, the default gateway is like a route. We'll discuss it about this later. But for time being, remember that if you want to communicate from your PC, for suppose your PC, you are communicating with internet. Okay, ultimately the data whatever you are sending, first it goes to the default gateway. You know this, right? Yeah. Default gateway. Similarly on the switch also, if you want to make it communicate with other network, ultimately you need to give an IP default gateway. Gateway IP must be given, right? The command to give default gateway is IP default gateway and whatever the IP of the default gateway, right? But see here, IP address you are giving in the interface configuration mode, okay? But IP default gateway you are giving in the configuration mode. Interface IP address you are giving in the interface configuration mode, and default gateway you are giving in the configuration. Remember this. This is the difference. You need to point out these things in order to configure.